imposter syndrome, we all get it. How can you get ahead of it?
Any way a business is successful, in my mind, is if you reflect what your customers are. Employers are always looking for great people because it makes their business better. Don't let yourself be intimidated by your profound beliefs of what you think limits you. Not every job's for everybody. You won't be successful all the time, but go in there confidently and you're not there to demonstrate you're somebody else. My name is Jonathan Westhoff. I'm Chief Executive of West Brom Building Society, which employs 750 people, and this is my Duvet flip.
If I'm a young person, deep down, I know I need to save. Where do I start?
The first stage, from my personal view, is are you okay for a couple of months if there's an interruption? What keeps you going for a couple of months so that you don't have to panic?
You say a couple of months. What would your advice be? How many months?
If you are fortunate, if you can get to a quarter, i.e. 3 months, you'd be unlucky to have interruptions that went beyond that.
What's the first thing that needs to change with mortgages?
The problem that a mortgage has is the sheer price of houses. Now, we have a government that says they'll do 400,000, 90,000 into social ownership. I really admire the intent. It needs somebody to work out how that happens. You can't just suddenly build 400,000 new homes a year. I don't think there's enough bricks in the country.
Can we not build them in Lego? And my final question, what's your duvet flip? What gets you out of bed in the morning to flip the duvet? Jonathan, welcome to my duvet flip. How are we?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to this.
Well, thank you for popping over for a coffee and a chat. And today we're going to talk about your career, the work you're doing at the moment. And I really want to tackle in a little bit around money, savings, where you see the future going, and what advice you have for the next generation, anyone tuning in. We do have a disclaimer on this, so anyone to take their own money advice. This is only opinions, and go and get an expert opinion, even though you are an expert.
I'm certainly not qualified for advice.
So get your own advice, but look, I want to start here. I always start here. Who is Jonathan? Tell me a bit about your first job that paid you a proper salary. What was that job?
So the first proper salary job was actually with Barclays. It's amazing the way society's changed. In the days I joined Barclays, I would have been described as a university dropout. We always applied negativity to somebody who changed course. And I did go to university, very quickly realised, not for me, for a variety of reasons. So I took what was in those days, you have to remember, coming out of the late 70s recession, it was all about just getting a job, particularly in areas like Liverpool, where unemployment was huge, particularly youth unemployment. So I followed what many, it was a bit like the 1960s docs, we went out of what was A-level school and we went into banks, and they were the big employers at the time. I really didn't know much about the career. I didn't know that I had to sit exams, for example. That was a shocker to me when they said, oh, by the way, you'll go on day release. And I didn't really have any ambitions, plan or anything else. But I absolutely enjoyed every moment. I worked in branches for about 10 years on and off. I worked in regional offices. I learned from the best, people who loved their clients, particularly in the corporate side. They absolutely love their clients. They'd do anything for them, they'd fight for them. And I learned a lot about how you can develop your risk techniques, your skills, your people management. I had a whole multitude of jobs from that very early start as office junior, opening the envelopes and filling the statements in Barclays Bold Street branch, which now doesn't exist like many branches. In fact, I think it's a hairdresser's now, which is quite a turn. It's not
Did you get your hair done there?
No, it's too expensive for me. It's a very market part of that.
Look, I love that because you've just clearly shown that if you do quit or drop out, as they say, graduate dropout, it doesn't have to define where you end up. And you're a great example, and we're going to get on to that. Why Barclays? Why go into banking? Was it something that you thought that was a good idea, or was it literally, I need to earn a bit of money, they're the most prominent logo I can see? What was it for you? Was there a bit of calculation around what industry you get into, or was it more just, I want a job?
No, there wasn't. And that's repeated through many stages actually of my time. I didn't really have a plan of what I wanted to do, be, etc. It was, as I said, I think I mentioned before, it was just about having a job, and the banks were the big employers at the time. I think of my closest school friends, who several of whom I still see now actually, which is a delight of a reason I've returned to spend more time in Liverpool. They went into banks as well. And you had Lloyds, NatWest, Barclays. Wasn't me wanting to be different. I think what it was, and it is words of people, I won't quote names because I think that's right, but a guy who was the personnel manager, as it was called in those days, it was the way he unwittingly sold it to me, because I did have the opportunity to join any one of the banks that they all offered. And he used the words, do you know what, we've done our intake. We always do it in the summer, in September it was a bit like, and you've missed that. And we're not taking people on anymore. We've filled, but there's something about you. I'm going to try and find a role for you. That was me sold. He probably said that to 50 other people in that way, but it was me sold. It was, you want me, even though I'm nothing. And that was my choice. So an interesting fact about me is very early in my life, when helping my dad do his milk round, I used to deliver milk to Bill Shankly, the most famous perhaps of all Liverpool managers, embedded in a culture of starting with the fans and building the club up from there. All about culture for Bill.
And what is your advice to anyone who feels like they're nothing when they go to a job interview or they don't have the experience? We talked offline about imposter syndrome. We all get it. We get those moments where we're thinking to ourselves, when is someone going to figure me out?
Yeah.
And you get it wherever you are, and you can do 100 speeches, but you're 101, it's a different audience, it's in a different country, and you go,
True.
Oh my God. What is your advice to the young people who are applying for work, or anyone who may have a little wobble and now trying to get back on their feet, in terms of, I don't think you can ever defeat imposter syndrome, but how can you get ahead of it when you're in a situation?
That's a really interesting question, Jack, actually, because I do ponder this a fair bit. And what strikes me is the intimidation and the lack of confidence instilled in people that may go into those situations. It has changed, and it's changed because I think employers have almost said, crikey, we've got this wrong for so long. We've been looking for a set type, for somebody that ticks all boxes. In my day, somebody who could carry off an image before customers type thing, and have now realised how much they've missed out from the people who may have doubts about themselves, but have this immense representation of UK PLC, the people. You reflect what they are, and the only way a business is successful in my mind is if you reflect what your customers are. And you are that reflection. And you may have a lack of confidence in asking for what you need to help you learn, develop, etc. Have the confidence to do so. Employers are always looking for great people because it makes their business better. It makes their culture better. It makes their environment better to lead. Therefore, be confident you are just a person in a variation of many, and you probably are the right person. But don't let yourself be intimidated by your profound beliefs of what you think limits you. Not every job's for everybody. You won't be successful all the time. You won't find the all experiences brilliant, but go in there confidently, but confident in that you represent something different, unique, yourself, and you're not there to demonstrate you're somebody else.
When did you find that?
So,
because that is, I'm smiling because I'm so on board with that. Because you know what, I've gone into senior rooms, and you go in a lot of senior rooms, and you go in there, you're like, oh my God, you're human.
Yeah, I think a couple of places click, and you have to look at the people who make you click into a different way of thinking. And the great first piece of advice was, someone wrote on the performance review, says, he's as comfortable with A, because I think it means people when you classify it by a trade, as he is with B. And that would be people that you'd say, he doesn't seem to change in front of him. I thought, actually that's been observed as a value. And from that point, there's no need to change. You bring what you are to it, to be really me as an individual, and to bring a bit of Scouse humour, if you like. I don't actually have a very good Scouse humour, but I do my best to bring it into the room and to lighten the mood and to use humour to make a point. And he encouraged it. He was very positive about it. I thought, well, you are valuing that type of input. I really don't need to change. And I set back a couple of years later, my first chance as a board role, and the feedback I heard, I'll never know how true this is, but it is from someone I respect hugely who's still in the industry, and he said, You didn't get it because the chairman said he wouldn't have a Scouse accent on the board. And you suddenly realise that even, that would have been probably 20 years ago now, there were still prejudices in there that were so ill-founded. And yet somebody much bigger than that had respected the differences it brought, somebody you wouldn't expect to.
So talking about that, how did that make you feel? Getting told that you don't get the role because you've got a Scouse accent, which by the way I think is amazing, the Scouse accent. I've got the Essex accent. But that can either put you into two, I see that puts you into two lanes.
Yeah.
That either puts you in the fighting lane, and actually I will get a board role because that's what I want to do and I want to grow, or it puts you into the lack of confidence and that shy kind of go into your box and people deal with things differently. What did it do for you? And when someone's told something based on your characteristics, what should people do?
So there's several reactions. The first is the sort of bolshy part of me, the true Scouser. I ain't changing. That's his problem, not my problem. And I don't think other people in the business think the same way, so I'm not going to tar the business. The really helpful point was, he was wrong, but he also got it wrong. The easier explanation was, the guy who I then worked for directly was a far better appointment than I was. I learned an immense amount from him, and I didn't have a problem. Well, they didn't realize I didn't have a problem when marketers came in, and I learned pretty well everything that finished me off and allowed me to go on and on. And if I'd have been on the selection panel, I'd have picked him as well. So he didn't have to pick on a false thing. He could have just gone straight for the quality issue. But it did get the fighter in me, and it says, well, look, am I prepared to stand or fall by this? I'm not changing. And, crikey, by then my accent had broadly been lost. I was thinking, how big's your problem? But it wakes you up. It didn't make me give up. It didn't make me overreact as a fighter, if you like. It just made me sort of quite calmly say, right, it will, come or not come, but it won't be because I believe that's a problem. I'll carry on as I am.
What you've just said, we can put into every situation in life, can't we?
Yes, we can.
And sometimes opportunities come and you're not ready for them, or you are ready, but someone else doesn't think you are. But I'm a big believer that, if it's meant to be, it will happen somehow.
Yeah.
As long as you have that positive attitude. And I think that's what you did in that situation. You had the positive attitude, you was grown up about it, you didn't throw your toys out the pram, as the famous saying goes. And you thought, okay, what can I learn from this individual who did get it?
Yeah.
Because my time will come.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jack. And if the work parts were maybe I took a more, momentary, more extreme view, it was where I felt people who, for their own aims, hadn't stood up for me in that situation. That was the bigger hurt.
That hurts, doesn't it?
Now that's where I do. That's
a whole conversation.
That's when I do bang the door open quite sharply on somebody and let them know what I think. And actually, the admiration. There was one person who blew up actually, and he's been my biggest sponsor ever since. He is literally, and I don't know. I sort of know tactically and strategically why he didn't stand up for it. There was things that developed afterwards. But you do have a duty not to overthink, but to just think through situations and people's motivations. And you suddenly find out there's a dynamic in the room. You've got one with a prejudice, but others that have got other agendas, which sometimes happens. Try and do your best to start with the other person's side. What are they seeing and why are they doing it? And it just gives you a better chance of dealing with the situation.
How do you do, and I really like that, is see how other people viewing something. And I use the same as saying, I keep saying it and saying it again.
Yeah.
When you're too close to the elephant, all you can see is grey.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to step away from the elephant to see all perspectives. Sometimes you're so close, you're stuck in mud, someone has to help you.
Yeah.
How can you see it from their side when you think someone has your corner and you've done nothing but be loyal, transparent and built that trust, and you're sitting around the table with their family for dinner a week before, you go to a boardroom, and this has happened to me, you go to a boardroom and then they've all had dinner separately and they sledge you, and it's the cricket team when they whisper in the ears and wind people up. And you go, you know what? I just gave my soul.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you can respond, you can react, and you can see it from their side. But deep down, we don't do swearing on this show.
Only in the head.
Yeah, only in the head. How do you then move forward with a working relationship like that individual who became a big sponsor for you? That must be hard. How do you deal with that?
Well, the first and foremost, you take the learning from it. What did I miss that I didn't understand about how that person would behave in a certain scenario when I thought they would be my strongest vote if I was a supporter? It's I always quote movies in places. It's a bit like, one of my favourite films, obviously, Marlon Brando and The Godfather. It's just business. It's not personal. And if you can believe it isn't, they're just trying to protect their career or whatever, and that's fine. People must do what they think they must do. But if it's not a personal thing, it's not an unacceptable personal thing, then it's easier to deal with. And you do sometimes have to, it's the world we live in. You have to put yourself in a different context between, I probably overreact more in my personal life with things and values than I do ever in my business life, because it is business. But as long as it's not damaging somebody in the wrong way, there's a difference between not giving somebody a fantastic rise and growth to damaging somebody in an organization, and that's two different things. But I just found that I reconciled my mind to it is just business. It's in that scenario, it did emerge. I could see 2 years later exactly why. It was a personal agenda that the rest of the board couldn't see. So give yourself a chance to be understanding and learn. Now that doesn't mean, Jack, in my mind, don't be emotional. I think emotion is just as important. Wearing your heart on your sleeve. If you want to be in a purpose-led, values business, you've got to put your heart on your sleeve. You don't have a choice about that. I don't mean in a sort of loss of control type emotional way, but but to do that, to be in that type of business, you have to be quite, first of all, business focused, viability. We discussed that before we started chatting. That's the first security. But after that, there's so much more you can do about what you do with that viability. And that is, the satisfaction is huge. So I don't think you should take the emotion completely out of business, but emotion has a place and an understood place. It's almost construct your emotion and share it. So, we have a value, be passionate, simple as that. Unless you can be passionate, you miss out on a lot of what the business does and what the enjoyable part of being with it is. And that means that relationships sometimes will be fractious.
You took so much sense, and I just wish more people did.
The West Brom Building Society this year became 175 years old. A long established, having seen through many, many global incidents and still delivering the original value that 20 people locally came together to do, and that is to put people in their homes.
So Jonathan, I want to talk a little bit about that M&S, mortgages and savings. I don't know which one we tackle first, you decide, but what's a mortgage? How's it changed over the years? Has it changed? Why is it important? How does one get one? Who gets one? Break it down how it all works. Because you hear on the young people say, oh yeah, I want to get a property and I need a mortgage. But a lot of us don't have a bloody clue.
Yeah, no. It's interesting, Jack, actually, because I think the whole mortgage environment has changed so dramatically and so many times over periods of time since the 1970s. But fundamentally, look, a mortgage at its base is an enabler to allow you to move from a rented situation into owning your own home over time. And look, the challenge has always been this word deposit. How much can you contribute? And why do we want to deposit? It's a little bit like it gives a security buffer in case there's difficulties and you need to sell the house to repay your loan. So it's not there just to make it a difficulty, it's there for a protection for both the lender and the borrower. And
does it show a bit of commitment as well?
It does show skin in the game commitment. Yeah. That is certainly an old lending approach, is to show skin in the game. But I agree. A great initiative recently by Skipton Building Society was, look, if you've got a rent record of several years where you've paid on time, non-stop, but it's meant you haven't had the capacity to save a deposit, it just shows your commitment and your ability to service. So I think we have to think new. We have to think different ways, because look, we're seeing a growth. About 1 in 5 buyers now take a mortgage of over 35 years. And that sounds, oh crikey, that's a shift from the old days when the maximum used to be 25 years.
So it's gone from 25 to 35 approximately.
No. Yeah, for 1 in 5, many still take shorter. So people are expecting to be working into the late 60s. And therefore, with the average age moving into the early 30s before people take out a mortgage nowadays, different to many years ago, you're reasonably still matching to retirement age, broadly, or stop working age. So they have changed in structure. I think, thankfully, we hit a place in the financial crash, which many would have been too young to remember, but it ain't that long ago to many of us, 2008, whereby the structure of the markets had changed dramatically. It's sort of gone to a commodity basis. It wasn't really about getting that objective of home ownership. It was about almost trading your home for making money off it. I generalised, but that was a sort of philosophy, and you saw the rise of the buy-to-let market and homes being forced up in prices because more landlords are coming in. What's been a nice wake-up call of the crisis is a return to a more, what I see as normal structure. People, first-time borrowers are, again, feeding into the market. The market is looking for ways to adapt serviceability, making sure they can afford it, making sure you don't fall into difficulty.
And a first-time borrower, is that a first-time borrower against a mortgage or just borrowing anything?
No. We talk about first-time buyer. The buyer of a house.
Cool.
So the first time you go and take that bold step, daunting always has been, where you step into home ownership. And what's important around that is, it's a good question about what is a mortgage, but also the bigger question is, what is running your own home when you're responsible for everything in it? Your landlord's not going to come and fix a broken window or whatever. You have all the responsibility of running that home. And what therefore the lender's role is critically, and this has developed well since the financial crisis, is making sure that in difficult circumstances, you can afford to make those repairs. Because on the savings side, jumping away from mortgages, still far too few people even have a couple £100 ready as a rainy day to deal with a problem.
What's a good rainy day for you?
What's a good rainy day?
Well, like if a young person's, and I get the rainy day savings, I think that's is a great way to kind of sum it up. But what is your advice? What if I'm a young person and I'm getting like all these different things coming my way? But you know what, deep down, I know I need to save, and I know that savings is secure with the right people. Yeah? Where do I start?
So think about it in a different way to a physical amount, or think about your life and think about an interruption circumstance. Now that can be either a calamitous collapse of a boiler or a breakdown of a car, that's one thing. But think about what has been strange for many people. We've gone through a period where you could almost say we only have structural unemployment. That's people transitioning between jobs or choosing not to work. But think about those times may well change at points. And there may be a period, whether through choice or otherwise, you're without an income for a couple of months. So look at what you've got. And the first stage, from my personal view, is, are you okay for a couple of months if there's an interruption? So what is your expenditure, including your mortgage payments, including your various bills and utilities? What keeps you going for a couple of months so that you don't have to panic?
So what's your outgoings? What is your responsibilities and commitments?
Exactly.
And then you say a couple of months. What would your advice be? How many months?
Never call me on for advice. But, my view is, I would say, if you are fortunate, if you can get to a quarter, i.e. 3 months.
3 months.
That would seem to be you'd be unlucky to have interruptions that went beyond that. But 3 months would be a really good aim. Now that's easy said. That's quite a demanding thing. If you think of most mortgages and bills, you're probably talking to do that a few £1,000s, as we all know, just to make sure you're not panicking that and you're not running up arrears. The real risk, unfortunately, in the world is, whilst people may support you during that period and say, okay, well, don't pay us back for the moment, that becomes reportable on what we call a credit file. So there is a record that is available to everybody of how you have behaved in your loans and your mortgages and everything else. And there is a duty. It's not being nasty. Lenders have to report that. It's called a reciprocation agreement, whereby you can get the information as long as you provide the information.
how diverse and inclusive is that credit scoring in today's world with everything taken into consideration?
Yeah, so two things. Credit scores, to an extent, can be managed when it's within your control. That's your decisions, and you can look at your credit score. Everyone can access them online and see what your rating is. And I guess the challenge with them that comes to your diversity and different reasons point is they are statistical. So you may have two people in here, and this is something we focus on as a society trying to understand, and they both have missed two loan payments. Statistically, that scores you as two missed payments. Behaviourally, there may be very different circumstances behind that. Life throws non-stop curveballs at many people, and things happen that are, that they throw you off course. Life also has some people who may just overstretch themselves and not really be sensible, but those two people have the same score. And we're moving to a world of data, a world of better interrogation of data, and our duty is to understand that difference and then not treat them. Because if you do get a poor credit score, as a general rule of thumb, future borrowing costs you a lot more. People will still lend to you, but they put a risk premium on top, i.e. an extra percentage point or two. And that can be very expensive in some circumstances.
It's a bit like the insurance. If you live in I don't know if this is true or not, but if you live in an area, your car insurance could be more, but you've got more experienced driver than someone else, and you could have more years driving experience with no claims because you're in a different area. Your costs could be different in the policy.
Well, that's absolutely right. And that's driven by, statistically, there may be more car thefts in an area.
In an area.
And that's statistics. So you're priced for some items that are controllable, like your driving skills and safety, etc. But you're also priced on things you can't control. And that's often the way. I think there are two control elements in credit assessment. One is you can help your score by doing certain things, but if you are understood behaviourally to say of experience, I don't know, a divorce or so, which does cost money no matter what the circumstance. It's a bit like cars, it's not a blame situation, it's just it does happen, but it tends to cost and disturb. Now that's a situation we all accept happens in life for very sad reasons, but that person's not deliberately overspent or whatever else. They deserve a cheaper second chance.
So how do you then go and get a cheaper second chance when so much right now is computer says no?
Correct. Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. And whether AI solves it or not on the masses, I don't know. But what we have the fortune, somebody in the sector came up with a great quote of somebody he'd worked with before, and he said his biggest challenge as a business was staying small. And there's a truism to that, because staying small enough, you can individualize. You can look at people's circumstances. One of the great examples of that from our perspective is there's a great fallout of the Northern Rock collapse, primarily called mortgage prisoners, which you can read about online.
Called mortgage?
Mortgage prisoners.
Prisoners.
And the reason they're called mortgage prisoners is lots of the lending pre-2008 was what we call self-certified interest only. Half the people were just taking interest only mortgages. You don't know how you're going to repay them. And then as a solution to paying back the costs of the collapse of Northern Rock, lots of these mortgage books, as we call them, collective mortgage borrowers, were sold to companies that were not really banks or building societies. And when rates collapsed in 2009 onwards, they didn't reduce their rates. In fact, some of them went up. And these borrowers were trapped because new affordability test rules, so it didn't happen again, were brought in. You had to be thoroughly tested on affordability. But even though these guys have been paying their mortgage and not defaulted anywhere, they couldn't satisfy the new affordability rules. And that is a great example of out of their control. We actually said, look, these are individuals who are proven, and as soon as the regulator relaxed slightly on the rules and said, well, yeah, okay, you can take into account that, we started getting them out of that circumstance and getting them onto much lower cost mortgages that could then come into repayment, so that they would, at the end of the day, have a retirement if they could without the debt of a mortgage or a rent. But that's an example of that was not their fault. The world said it was okay for them to take a mortgage the way they did. A collapse happened and they're trapped because they don't satisfy the new safety rules, if you like. but they've done nothing wrong.
Oh no, yeah.
Now, whereas we're small, we're able to look at them individually and say, yeah, we can help out there. This is, some we can't, but we can. There's a certain cohort. You can't do that if you're a massive global concern.
No.
But you can do it if you're regionally focused, people focused, and that's your obsession is looking for yes, not looking for no. Looking for how you help, not looking for how you decline. Your phrase, computer.
Which then makes it gives the opportunity for more people to own their own home, right?
It does.
Which is the purpose
and look,
of what you're doing.
This is so important. We were chatting before offline about the pensions looming time bomb. Have enough people got enough to afford a ceasing working arrangements in the later years? I think it was Standard Life recently did a bit of analysis that said pensions are hard enough, but if you are still renting when you cease working, you need a pension pot of, I think the number was 391,000 more than somebody who has paid off their mortgage. I think that's a big number, but it makes real logical sense when you look at maybe another 15, 16, 17 years of paying rent and increasing rents with inflation. So it's a real hard fact that almost your best pension is to take a mortgage out when you're young and pay it off when you get to a time when your life changes and you don't work anymore. Then you will have the security of at least the one thing you've got, whether you get decisions around fuel payments or whatever else, the one thing you've got is your home.
And do you then become a homeowner once that's paid off?
Yeah. I mean, in my mind, even when you've got a mortgage, you're a homeowner.
Because there's a lot of thing on TikTok saying, well, actually, you don't own the home.
Of course you do. Despite its long focus on encouraging people to save, recent research has shown that nearly half of, particularly under 24-year-olds, keep their savings in a nil interest paying current account. Now, that contributes to the 250 billion of money in this country that earns no interest in private individual accounts. Cost of that per year, even 1% improvement is 2.5 billion to those people. Interestingly, we've got a lot of work to do, therefore, to encourage more savers to save in the right way.
I don't know why, but I've just been called and I've just become the Minister of Mortgages, yeah? And I'm like, oh, I know who I will call because I have no Scooby on what's going on. We won't say most ministers do, but anyway. And you're on holiday and you're sitting it's hot outside, so you go inside and you've got a call when it's going to happen, yeah? And it's all been booked in correctly. And I'm on the call and I'm saying, Jonathan, they want me to come up with a policy. What do you advise? What's the first thing that needs to change with mortgages? What would you be advising me as my special advisor in the industry? What would you be saying that needs to be changing?
So I think little on the mortgage side needs to change. The problem that a mortgage has is the sheer price of houses. And in any landlocked country like ours, where land is a scarcity, it's the supply issue. So nobody can fix it through the mortgage market, the problem, if you like, in home ownership. It needs a joined up solution.
To build more homes.
Now we have a government that says they'll do 400,000, about 90,000 into social ownership. I really admire the intent, and others have stated it. It needs somebody to work out how that happens. You can't just suddenly build 400,000 new homes a year. I don't think there's enough bricks in the country.
Can we not build them in Lego?
I've often thought about how do we get plastics problem into structures, but I'm not a scientist and I don't understand why things can't work. But it needs like many things, it needs a joined up strategy between all players. Mortgage lenders who will facilitate it, builders who can do it, repurposing of buildings that lie around. We've been through this type of thing before. We've been through the slum clearance of the sort of 50s and 60s into estates and everything else, and that was council-led mainly. But we need two things. We need a greater stock, and we need a stock that is environmentally helpful to have, not damaging, So we need to do an awful lot of thinking about how do we do this. Mortgage lending is only one function. Look, in the country, there's something like 1.8 trillion of savings and 1.6 trillion of mortgages. There's plenty of money to fund the mortgages. That works. There's loads of cash around to do it, and that's without the wholesale markets. So mortgages can play their part. I think now that we have normalised and lower deposit mortgages are much more available than they were 10 years ago, we've got the structure right. I think we've got the learnings of making sure people can afford it right. So lots is right about the market, plenty of supply, hopefully not oversupply that forces people to suicide margins type of thing that then threatens the viability of too many. But we have a sensible proposition around mortgages. We have a consumer duty regulation that's come in that says you must make sure it's good value for the customer. And that's terrible to say about an industry, but thank goodness it's in, because that's what we all try and do. So it's there. The problem is those mortgages will become harder to get, not because of the availability, but because the associated challenge of actually getting a house you can afford. And that needs other solutions to come in. A variety of strategies. I think shared ownership is a great example of a route through. We're probably lend much more than our normal market share in shared ownership, because people may start just owning a fifth of the house from a housing association and then progressively increase ownership. More solutions of that nature we can work on and make them more commonly available. But until we get the supply right, there's always going to be a shortage of supply with an over demand.
Absolutely.
And that forces prices.
But do you see what I did as the minister? I called on industry, the experts. I didn't have all the answers. I definitely had all the questions. I think that's where you start. You need to bring the right people into the table. You do. And like you have in the past is, you know, when something needs to be done, bring 19 people around the table, get it done, right?
Yeah. That's absolutely the way.
And I think that's so important. I think you talk so much sense, and I think, yes, there's these big figures running round, but actually, how do we start with building 100 and then 200, and in what areas and where and who needs to do what? Because you know what, we're really a resourceful country. There's some really smart people like yourself leading organisations that can really do something meaningful if people are willing to.
Yeah.
We've only got time for a few more questions.
Yes, sure.
I want to turn a little bit about your employees. You've got 750 employees. Why do you think you're a good place to work? Why should people go and look at your career site? What opportunities can someone get involved with, even if there's no live opportunities right now? But tell me, why should someone, because there's one side being on the customer side, but there's also one side coming and joining you on the mission, right?
Yeah, it's a really good question, that, because we've ventured into the sort of the stuff you can't touch, you can't feel, the intangible, and loads of books are written, what's culture, you know. The reality is how it feels in a workplace. And, you know, I do talk, this is not an oversight, you know, I try, unless I'm absent from the office, I'll meet the new entrants every month on the first day and try and get across is buy into the values. You know, you really, if you're passionate about it, you'll enjoy it. You know, it's a meritocracy. You know, I think it sounds great to some and not so great to others when you say, I congratulate you on everything you've done when you come into this place. Degrees, non-degree, whatever you've achieved, but from this point forward, that really doesn't matter. What matters is what you want to do, what you want to contribute and be part of this. And I think if you can articulate your purpose when you believe in what's being done and you become an advocate yourself, and you know, you can only say to people, come try it. You know, we seem to have a very high success rate of people feeling that was a great move for them. And it comes down to, can we as a mutual be the greatest payers in the world? Not possible, but we'll do all the right things. You know, we've had awards for not just real living wage, real living hours and all the commitments we make. So you've got to get the foundations right. You can't just say to people it's a great spirit and it's a great atmosphere and it's all lovely. You have to get the basics right, and you have to be a proud employer for those elements. But you build on that. Once you've got that foundation, you know, it is like, come and work with us. Come and see what's different about being in a mutual rather than a PLC, because there can be a different target culture. You know, you shift back to service. And look, you know, your first words are often, we ask people, word association, they say friendly. It's a friendly place to be.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit busy because I'm just on your career site applying for a job now. I love it. Because you know what? You get to see people, and I'm a big believer, see but don't say in certain situations. You're a good guy. I really see your intentions, your approach, is in a good place. And sometimes you do have to make hard decisions. That's business.
And that's
but you know what?
Yeah.
I would say, and I don't say things lightly, that you'd be a good person to work for. Whether it's not you directly and it's through a team, you've got 750 people and you can't have 750 direct reports. You need, I think the next generation and anyone, we are now looking at who is leading the organisation.
Yeah.
Because you can't be on the top floor, you don't understand the shop floor. You understand the shop floor, I can see that. And people want to work for good people.
And look, you know, I think one of the dangers, that's really kind of you to say, but we're not perfect, we're only halfway there ourselves. You know, I'm 60 years old and I'm still thinking, I'm still too harsh an employer. I still give too harsh a feedback. I just want everything to be perfect, and I don't praise people enough. Probably almost at all. I expect it. You've got to realise as well what you're really bad at. And you know, fortunately other people start to understand you, that's your nature, you've been driven from a young age or whatever. But it's, at the end of the day, it's about values. If everyone knows you're sincere and you do it for the best interests, you've got a fighting chance of being respected. I was brought up, you know, we family had a market stall in the middle of Liverpool. And I still remember the way those people wouldn't take a penny more than, they weren't traders that would do, they were genuine people, you know, Reenie's Flowers, Thelma's Records, John the Bookshop, you know, George and you know, the jewellery store type of thing. And they were all people very values-based. You could walk away and leave your store in charge of somebody and not a penny would be missing, you know. And you look at people and that's how they ran business in their own simple way. They didn't realise how sophisticated they were. Values-based businesses, they didn't realise it, but they were really what you model yourself around. Make sure you understand why you created the way you are, what you are, and what value you bring, but also understand what value you don't bring, and you know, get people to poke you every now and again.
And my final question.
Go.
Are you ready? What's your duvet flip? What gets you out of bed in the morning to flip the duvet?
So I've gone, if you'd have asked me through stages of career, you know, I used to be in the, crikey, I can do this new thing, this challenge. The duvet flip for me, and it does genuinely motivate me, is the pleasure of having a business that I think is totally there for the good. And I mean that absolutely wholeheartedly. And has worked itself into a position where it can be the good. It's not been the good in the past. It is the good. It's absolutely what should be, in my mind, creating a preeminent, respected and looked up to mutual building society for what it was as base principles. Getting that out there more and more, that absolutely motivates me. I have to tell you, I thought I wouldn't be still working at this age. I don't want to stop working.
Isn't that empowering?
Hopefully.
Isn't that empowering? But by the way, are you that famous person?
Just give me the old, tell me who you think I am, I'll sign it.
Gary Barlow?
He's a Mancunian, you can't say that.
It was going so well, wasn't it? I just want to say thank you for joining me on the show and just being your authentic self, sharing and educating the next generation a little bit around mortgages and savings and a bit about what you do in your career, so thank you.
No, thank you. It's been a joy to just speak openly and share experiences, none of which were planned there's no script. So. And you also took my fears away of sitting on the side of the table. Thank you.